Hey my friends, Sam Haymart for Test Driven TV. This week I am spending for the very first time some seat time in the 2016 Subaru WRX STi. I am an STi virgin. This is my first time with one of these things. I've seen them, I've read about them, I've heard about them, so I'm really excited to take this up on my favorite windy mountain road and flesh the thing out, see what it's really about. Now before we get out on the road, I do want to sort of go over what we've got here. On my very first Subaru WRX STi drive, they were nice enough to give me the Series Hyper Blue. I love this color and I really think it fits with the personality of this car, and it's very similar to Ford's Grabber Blue, and of course Ford now has a color very similar to this on the Focus RS, so it really sort of fits the bill here. Now the special edition also has a number of other touches, including these black BBS wheels, 18 inches. Now 18 inches doesn't seem like they're very large anymore, but they quite well fill the space in this car. And as you'll see when I'm driving this thing, they're plenty large. There's plenty of rubber on these tires. I don't think this thing needs larger wheels, not stylistically and not from the handling either. But this just has the styling touches that make the WRX STi. It's got a unique grille with the emblem down there. It has a unique front fascia, fog lights, big front splitter built right into that fascia. Now, in addition to what you see up front, this also has a lot of other unique styling features. We've got wider fenders here with the air extractor vents down here, a trademark WRX thing. Those lead into side sills, which are wider, helps for that wider rubber. But the biggest thing I can point out here is this car has a nice ass. It's got one of the best looking rear ends of any car in its class, I think. And that goes to a number of things. Down below, you've got 4 exhaust pipes. They're the real deal. Those aren't fake. They're not glued on trim pieces. They're real exhaust pipes that are really trimmed out nicely with that lower fascia. But the big thing, of course, it's the wing. This wing is iconic, not only of this car, but it's iconic of the entire sport import movement. But the thing about it is, it really belongs to this car, I think. No other car looks like it belongs than this one right here. It is now the automotive equivalent to a lip ring, a hat on backwards, and baggy jeans, but I just love it. Under the hood is what makes this car what it is, though. Its 2.5-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder boxer engine belts out 305 horsepower and 290 pound-feet of torque. With a 6-speed manual transmission, it sends power to all 4 wheels through Subaru's well-revered symmetrical all-wheel drive system. The torque split defaults to 41% front and 59% rear, but in the STi, you get the user-controllable center differential. With its console-mounted switch, you can vary the aggressiveness of its locking depending on your situation, whether be it on the track or in slippery conditions. Now the first thing you notice when you start this thing up is how loud it is. This engine's just got a bass thump to it that just fills the cabin, and it really sort of, it's like there's a subwoofer, and there might be for all I know. But let's get going and see what this thing really cooks up. Well, it'll wind right to its rev limiter, that's for sure. That I know already. Whew. Well, the first thing I can say is that this engine does have a very nice sound to it. It really cooks. Even though the red line on this thing isn't terribly high, just under 7,000 RPM, it goes right there right quick. That is a very good thing. And turbo lag, there's a little bit of it, and you can hear a lot of noises from under the hood that have to do with the turbocharger. Whether you're laying into the throttle, whether you're off the throttle. It's got a nice bass boom to it though for a 4-cylinder, and I like that because so often these 4-cylinders tend to really sort of live in the mid to high fidelity range, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it, when it comes to sound. But this just has a nice crisp bass to it, and that's always a nice thing. It's pretty refined too. It doesn't have a lot of vibration. It doesn't make a lot of racket. And the only other boxer engines I've really spent a lot of time with are the naturally aspirated ones, particularly in the BRZ, which that is one noisy box of rocks. And at low RPM, this engine has some of those same characteristics, but once you get this thing revving up here, it is smooth as silk. It's got a pretty decent amount of power too, 305 horsepower. When this thing first came out, that was a lot. 10 years later, man, 300 horsepower, 305 isn't all that anymore. A lot of pretty average vehicles have this amount of horsepower now. But what they don't have is this very sporting nature. This thing just loves to push and rev. And once you get used to the power curve, the turbo lag isn't so much an issue, because what you do, especially if you're up here on a windy mountain road, you just keep it cooking. You don't let yourself get down into that rev range where you know that you're going to have to build that boost back up. You just keep it going. Obviously, sometimes you can't help it, like now. But before you know it, you're pulling right out of that. Now it's thirsty, that'll give it. For a 2.5 liter engine, it's pretty thirsty, man. It's rated at 19 mpg for combined, and I haven't been getting close to that just yet, but it's because I've been on the power, so you can't blame it too much. I'll have a total at the end of the video here of what the total week was with this thing. I can tell now why the enthusiasts like this engine so darn much. It has a great power curve, it's eager to please, a little bit thirsty, a little bit rough at low RPM, but it's different than almost anything else out there on the market. So I give it 4 out of 5 stars. Now I drove about 30 miles to get to this spot where I shoot here, and the pavement coming up here is much rougher than it is here at this spot. This is relatively smooth, but it's still not perfectly smooth. And so what I discovered is that the suspension on this car is very, very stiffly sprung, which is great. It's great for the racetrack, it's great for smooth pavement, but it's absolutely terrible on rough pavement. It really, really is. And in this car, obviously it pays dividends on cornering. It pays dividends on this thing's ability to be agile and be really tight in transitions. It pays all those dividends, but I get kickback in this steering bad every time I hit a bump. The dash rattles bad every time I hit a bump. And if you are on a rough piece of road with nothing but bumps, you've got nothing but kickback in the steering and nothing but rattles in the dash. But if you can manage to stay on smooth pavement, it's golden. This thing just loves to play. And the brakes, well, they're your best friend because you really need them with this thing. Woo! So when it comes to scoring the chassis, I have to say that as much as I like the way this thing handles on smooth pavement, it's absolutely fabulous in so many ways. The minute you get it off the glass smooth pavement, all of that evaporates. Everything that makes this car good just completely goes away. And it's really quite sad, but nonetheless, I've got to rate the chassis at 3 of 5 stars. The interior of the Sirius Hyper Blue has a lot of nice trim in it, starting with Alcantara seats, and then there's trim here on the doors as well. All of it has blue accent stitching, and that also carries through to the steering wheel here and the shift boot, and that of course goes along with the carbon fiber trims that you're going to find on the dash and here on the console. It's a pretty nice down to business look and feel, and I really like what they've done here, especially on the special edition. These sport seats are very supportive, they're very comfortable, they're manually adjustable, but I found no problem getting comfortable for the most part. The seating position, I do like that. It's got a nice feel to it. You can see just a little bit of the hood there, which I always like. I guess I'm kind of old school that way. And it's just a nice feel here. The steering wheel with its flat bottom and its grips here. Very nice when you're carving the canyons because you can really get a nice grip on it. I like that. And the materials in here, other than the incessant rattles that were going on in the dash on the bumpier roads and some of the rattles around the cabin, the general material quality as far as the feel and touch is pretty good, but I have to sort of dock it just a little bit for all the rattles, because in 2016, in my opinion, that kind of stuff just really isn't necessary. Now, when it comes to storage in here, I did find it was a little bit thin down here in the center console. Glove box isn't that large. Now, granted, this isn't an SUV, but this in particular, this could have a little bit more space here. This could be a few inches taller. There could be more space here. They didn't use it for some reason. But the good news is there is a place down here on the console for your phone, a nice big bin down there. And of course, sitting here looking forward, you've got a nice steering wheel to look at with lots of controls here, and the instrument cluster, very easy to read and down to business. It doesn't have a lot of glitz to it, but it has just enough of the digital display that you can customize. The red backlighting, it all works very well. It's easy to read while you're on the go. Rear seat space is actually pretty impressive back here, a lot better than I thought it'd be for this being sort of a performance-minded car, but we're in that same size class with the Toyota Corolla, the Ford Focus, and a lot of others, so it would be expected that space back here is pretty good. The seating position, not too bad. It does have a little bit of a low cushion down here, but that's to be expected in this class. But the big thing, of course, legroom is pretty good, and these seats about halfway forward, halfway back. I'm doing pretty good here, and even if they came back a little bit, as you can see, there's a little bit of a concave here on the back of that seat, so I wouldn't be completely crushed. Headroom's pretty good, and generally I'm pretty comfortable back here. Now, as far as amenities are concerned, there are no vents back here, there are no ports back here. Some of the vehicles in this class do have that. Now, these seats, of course, they do fold down in a 60-40 split, so you can extend the trunk space in here if you need to put longer things in there. The trunk is sizable for its class and lined with above average materials, but the best part about the trunk, though, is what's under the mat, a temporary spare tire. Given the STi's 18-inch wheels and big Brembo brakes, this is a bonus unexpected. Overall, I'm pretty pleased with this interior, except for the few small things that I've mentioned, so overall, I give it 4 out of 5 stars. The Series Hyper Blue comes with a Harman Kardon 440-watt audio and navigation touchscreen infotainment system. The menus and screen interface are easy enough to use, but the audio quality really isn't up to a car like this. There's no Apple CarPlay or Android Auto either, bringing technology score to 4 or 5 stars. And the last measure here in our test is quality feel. If it weren't for a stiff suspension and less than smooth roads, it might have fared better. But this is positively the worst rattling and shaking car I've ever tested in my 10 years here going up and down Apache Trail. Period. Quality feel score comes in at 3 of 5 stars. Well, friends, wrapping it up for the Subaru WRX STi, I had a really good time with this car, as you saw, but this thing sort of reminds me of that friend you had back in high school that was a really wild nut. He was fun to go out and party with, have a good time, makes everybody laugh, but in the real world, you wouldn't really want to take him home to meet your parents, and you certainly wouldn't want to let your girlfriend anywhere near him because, well, you want to keep her. It's just one of those cars that just puts a smile on your face. It's crazy, but living with it every day, I'm not so sure I'd want to, and that really goes to the roughness issues that we talked about. And so when I look at the price here, we're right around $40,000. I've driven a lot of cars that perform just as well, not only in handling and in performance, but they didn't have the rough edges that this has when you get beyond the smooth pavement, and that really was a big thing for me here. So when I look at value, I put that at 4 stars, and when you put that in with everything else we've already talked about, I have to put my final score at 3.5 stars. And I'm sorry, guys, if you're a Subaru loyalist out there, I don't mean to beat on your car, but I have to call them as I see them here. And this car really goes from being a go-kart to a shopping cart the minute you get off the smooth pavement, and that, in my real world, that's a big problem. I'm Sam Haymar for Test Driven TV. I hope you enjoyed the ride. This is a rough and gnarly little beast, I gotta say. In fact, if I were to liken it to anything, it's a rat dog. It's an angry rat dog on acid. Yeah, that's what this thing is, an angry rat dog on acid. If you like the test drive you just saw, click on the link right there on your screen and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We test drive 1, sometimes 2 cars every week, plus we have a new video almost every day. There's always something new, so stay tuned.